So today we're going to find out whether Brian Wong thinks that China and Taiwan will go to war and what would the outcome of such a war look like. But that's not all. We're going to be also looking at his interpretations, his evaluations, his analysis of the entire China, South China. Again, we'll even include Australia as necessary, this entire region and what things look like in going forward in terms of the auto industry, but also just in general, the economies, et cetera. And we've started this process the other day with Larry Goldberg. Larry did a great job of kind of laying out the general idea, but now we need Brian to help us get to the next step. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Randy.
Great to have you on board. And
Yeah,
remember, Jeff Lutz will be on Friday morning. I'm sorry, Friday around noon. With an interview. Already completed that interview. It's amazing. You're going to want to see it. And then Larry Goldberg and I will finish it up on Saturday morning. All right. So, Brian, I'm going to start with, I'm not trying to trick you or anything, but, I was in a conversation with you the other day. We were talking about, and also Larry Goldberg and I were talking about this, as to China having issues with their neighbors. They don't get along with pretty much everybody. They don't get along with the South Koreans. They don't get along with the Japanese. They don't get along with Taiwan, obviously. They've got a border dispute going with India. Australia is kind of worried about things that they're doing in terms of shooting missiles off. They've got some islands that they, have stolen that are in dispute. Now they seem to be building some kind of an air strip on that island. So their neighbors are not exactly thrilled with them. But have you ever looked up who their top 10 trading partners are?
Yeah. It's all of the Asian countries. They're like number one, number two for Korea and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I wouldn't dispute the fact that they have problem with all these countries. Yes, they have disputes, but they still, do business with each other. Just like Japan, World War II, which we may discuss in relation to the invasion thing, killed like 17 million, 10 to 20 million, Chinese people. And so, of course, that generation of people hated Japan for like killing a lot of them. And, they ended up doing business, right? Because, yes, some people would say, okay, yes, you kill whatever, I will never do business with you. But then others would say, well, you killed a friend or someone else, but I'm willing to, or it's 2 generations past, I accept the fact that that the descendants don't bear that responsibility, so we do business.
Right. I think other than Germany and the United States, the other 8 top 10 trading partners were South Korea, Japan, Australia, Taiwan,
Yeah.
India,
Right.
Vietnam. I think anyway, it was like all from all their neighbors that they have all these disputes with. So this would seem there's obviously you're aware of the theory of if you're doing business with me, I'm not going to go to war with you. This would seem to suggest that China, for all of their bellicosity, is that a word?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Good. For all of their statements that they've made, that if that theory is true, that they would not be inclined to go to war with their top trading partners.
Right. But there's go to war, and then there's having some kind of conflict thing. So China's strategy, and I study these closely, they'll do kind of this slicing the ham kind of thing, right? Where they like take another sliver, take another sliver, take another sliver, and then get closer and closer to whatever, right? It's like, we're not gonna fight, but I'm gonna take a little bit more. It's like the red light, green light kind of thing. If you're not looking, you took 2 steps forward, right? So that kind of approach, because if you look at it, China has not had a full-on war. If you had World War II, you have the Civil War with the nationalists and the communists, and you have Korean War, and then you have the Vietnam border war that they had, where in 1980 they ran across the border from the guys who lasted for a couple of weeks, and then they have had a couple of border skirmishes with India, and they may have had a few other small minor levels of activity. And then I can discuss the islands issue thing as well. But then there's always these lingering disputes in the region, like Russia and Japan have a dispute over some island that starts with an S or something like that. So there's always these kind of like lingering disputes. So they are big trading partners, and they have not gone to full scale wars. So like, yeah, we argue about that, but we don't actually do anything. So they haven't actually gone to any war, unlike the United States, where 3 years out of every 4 we're at war with someone. We actually have a war going on, even if they're not officially declared.
I know they're not wars; they're something else. Yes,
right. There are these multi-billion-dollar things involving thousands of people that are not wars, right?
But at least our military has had some time in the field to test their weapons and test their skills. China's had, since Korean War, they haven't had anything where they could test their battle worthiness of their equipment or their troops.
Right. Other than beating up the people within the country, they don't do anything. Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of this entire thing as well. All right. So you were born in Hong Kong?
No, I was born in Canada.
Oh, you were born in Canada.
I was born in Canada. My parents were from mainland China. My mother was from Shanghai. My father's from Hubei, which is about 2 hours west of Shanghai. Okay. And then they both moved to Taiwan because they're on the nationalist side. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, he moved to the States for his degree. And then she joined him after he completed his degree and went to Canada. And I was born there.
Okay. All right. And then you also lived for a while in
Taiwan? In 2 years, I was in about 8 months in Taiwan. I lived there in Taipei. And then almost 2 years in Hong Kong, lived and worked there.
All right.
Mid-90s.
In the mid-90s. Okay. And then I think the rest of your background includes relatives in all 3, right?
Yeah. Relatives in all 3.
Okay. So, and one of the things when I was working out of Taiwan, I was dealing with the largest lock manufacturer in Taiwan at the time, and may have become one of the 2 or 3 largest lock manufacturers in the world behind Abus and Master. They, as quickly as they could afford to, they set up a factory in China. Mm-hmm. This was 45 years ago or 40 years ago. And now I think in our conversation, were you saying that pretty much any significant factory in Taiwan also has a factory in China?
Right, barring the one with national security sensitivity and stuff like that. Right. Correct. And the one other point about it is that I'm also a board member of Monty Jade West, which is a Taiwanese American, Asian American business group that does dealings with that and has members who are Taiwanese businessmen.
I got you. All right. So the connection between China and Asia. I'm sorry, between the real China, Taiwan. No, kidding. YouTube might take me off for that. What do you think? Anyway, so the real connection between Taiwan and China has become fairly tight then. In other words, the Taiwanese may not ever want to be part of China, and they might still have some lingering, anger and unease about their Chinese neighbors, but they do a ton of business, including was it you or somebody else that told me that a lot of the Taiwanese business owners who have another business in China or have a separate factory in China also have a separate family in China?
Right. That's not uncommon.
Okay. Right. All right. So now you've got people in Taiwan who they have children in China and spouses, et cetera, in China. So that, of course, creates more connective tissue with regard to any potential conflict they might have downstream. So what do you think? Let's start with the odds that China, that Xi would actually Xi would actually ever think, okay, it's time to put the missiles on the boats and go over and see what we can do?
So yeah, so the fact that the people don't want to go fighting or something like that is not particularly relevant to whether the dictator chooses to do something, right? So if she decides to pull the trigger on it, then he can initiate some kind of conflict, right? So it depends upon what goes on in his head, what he wants to do, right? Um, I if he had a rational assessment of it, he would not do it and be 0% chance of it doing it, because I look at that and he would lose clearly, right? But he may need to say, he needs to talk about it in some kind of weakness in his political position, where he needs to have this activity go. But basically, we can then go into how I would say that one, the day it starts, any kind of activity, blockade, attack, anything, the world markets crash because of TSMC, and then the U.S. would immediately and allies would immediately join on the Taiwan side. That people who say that there's any kind of doubt about that are just wrong. And then militarily, China would lose. The assessments that China would not lose, again, are wrong, and I'd be very clear as to why I make that assessment, that it would be an instant, not an instant, but it would be a loss. It would the financial damage, the other stuff, and other things would be horrible and terrible, but it'd be a fruitless thing that would not result in a victory.
Yeah. So again, what we would have, I'm assuming, on the part of America and the allies and China's neighbors, would be, even if they were not willing to militarily contribute, that they would be quick to stop all commerce in the same way that all commerce was stopped with Russia by some of the allies. So China would basically lose their top 10 trading partners, both for export and import. They depend heavily for oil from outsiders. Now, Russia could continue to supply that oil, and Russia has plenty of oil. But basically, the rest of everything else, they would have a huge drop in income, as well as a huge drop in raw materials and other things that they're getting from all of these different parts. I mean, you can't refine lithium if you don't have Australia shipping the lithium to you.
Right. I would say that if China actually got to a shooting, blockading kind of activity, that it would not just be Ukraine level support, where we give them $113 billion with weapons and blah, blah, blah. It's not going to be that. It's going to be even more. It's going to be like the Seventh Fleet, Sixth Fleet, setting up in bases that we have in Japan, Korea, and other Philippines, but outside the range. We wouldn't roll the fleet directly too near the coastline until other things have been done to make it safe for us to do that. But we, on the outside rim, we'd be there, and then there would be a far more active support for Taiwan, because Taiwan is more important than Ukraine, right? TSMC is 80 to 90% of the advanced chips in the world, critical for Google, Apple, Tesla, Nvidia, like
U.S. Army.
U.S. Army, right. So it would be, and basically, you look at your top, the tech component of NASDAQ and S&P 500, all of that would be there. So it's again not an option to let it get messed up.
So just for fun, I thought this was fun the other day when we discussed this, just for fun, let's say plan B. Let's say America says, well, they got atomic weapons, and we do still need the stuff that China makes, and so we're gonna kind of throw our weight around a little bit. We may throw up some trade embargoes and whatnot, but they don't actually, bring on the boats. And so Taiwan is militarily going to have to go it alone, at least for the first couple of weeks. And you and I had some things in common on that, but you actually brought up things I'd never thought of before. How do you think Taiwan would do if China did decide to go after them? Not with a blockade necessarily, just
An actual invasion.
just a land invasion, or a sea invasion with land, sea, however, air.
Yeah. Taiwan would be able to repel that invasion. It would fail. So here's the thing about it is that Taiwan is an island, just under 14,000 square miles of island. Okay. And they have 60 to 70% mountain. And their military fortifications are underground primarily in the mountains and underneath Taipei and other places. When I was there, I went on a bus outside of Taipei and I went through some hills. And I was looking at the tunnel and then coming through partway through and looking, there's right angles, there's tunnels going off to the side, right? For no reason, right? If you were like traffic, there's no reason why you'd be there, right? It's because the Taiwan military has dug into the island, just like Japan dug into Okinawa, went to the caves and stuff like that. But this was done over decades because they've been assuming since 48, 49 that Mao was going to come across the ocean and attack them. So they, in that fear, they have constantly built fortifications. There's Frog Mountain, other things. All these bases, the planes, the missiles, everything is inside caves. So people who don't understand, how explosives and missiles and stuff work, if you have a missile, say a 1,000-pound bomb, high explosive 1,000-pound bomb hits, how big is the crater, right? Okay, maybe it's 20, 30 feet across, maybe it's 6 feet deep. So 6 feet deep means that if I have 10 feet of cave, that first thing doesn't go through 10 feet of dirt, of rock, right? So it explodes the outside, right? So again, you can bombard everything you want, but if I got 20 feet, 40 feet of dirt, nothing goes through, right? I may need like the stuff in Iran where they got their missile stuff. It's like under, 80 feet of hard rock. So then the US, in order to try and crack that, would need to have bunker buster after bunker buster hit that thing precisely, boom, boom, boom. And you try to like dig through with explosives to get that stuff, right? So just because of that explosive component and the power of dirt, right? That stuff, that even nuclear bombs. Oh, I dropped a nuclear bomb and destroyed. No, you create a crater. It's 300 feet wide, and it's 50 feet deep or 100 feet deep. So even hitting a nuke against it doesn't necessarily do it. The Soviets had 7 or 8 giant nuclear weapons, the fusion ones, where they said, okay, I can make it especially big. I'm going to waste 10, 20 material for a fusion bomb, making it really big bombs in order to hit NORAD Mountain, right? Cheyenne Mountain, where NORAD, because they said, okay, I really want to get that if we actually go to war, right? So that's the kind of thing. And China has about 200 to 400 nuclear weapons, right? And again, mostly these things are, 250 kilotons or less, because you're looking for a particular effect, range and that kind of stuff. Anyway, so conventional weapons, assuming they're not going to go nuclear because there's issues with that. So then they come, and again, if it's 200, it would be, you try to take the island, you get hit with nukes, like whatever. Okay, so then you hit it with conventional stuff. I have to have really good pilots to try and pick off, these anti-aircraft defenses and stuff like that. I got to wear it down, right? Because anti-aircraft defenses shooting at your planes, and China's pilots in general have less than 100 hours of training per year. So they're kind of like, they're only recently got allowed to fly at nighttime and other stuff like that for training, right? So they're not like the Tom Cruise Top Gun guys. Oh, I got 2 planes in Vietnam, and one guy does the wild weasel, trying to take away the missile, and the other guy comes in and hits it. I mean, difficult stuff. And it's like, you had hit the most difficult target because it's defenses in the mountains. So normally you would have some number of weeks of trying to soften up air defenses, missile defenses. But I think that wouldn't work because of the fact that it's in the mountains. But let's say you're doing bombardment, you're somehow degrading something, right? Let's just make the assumption of that. One, I don't think you get there. So, but let's say you've degraded something, and now I want to try to cross the ocean to land amphibiouusly onto the thing. The difference between D-Day and hitting Taiwan is that the Germans had all of Europe, which is over 3 million square miles. They had 2,000 miles of coastline. So they had 58 divisions, roughly a million guys, on the eve of D-Day. 3 million, 4 million were over fighting the Russians. 1 million are left trying to defend Europe, right? So half in the north, half in the south, Italy and other stuff like that. So then there's only 10 divisions in France, right? And they had 3 divisions in Normandy, 3 divisions in Calais, 4 divisions held in reserve, right? And the 4 divisions held in reserve was run by the High Command. So on Normandy, you had 45,000 guys there. Generally, for an amphibious invasion, you want 3 to 1. So the Allies hit with about 130,000, 132,000 versus 40,000. They had the 3 to 1, right? And then they came across the English Channel. They had some fake things saying, hey, we're trying to hit in Calais. So then they didn't move the 3 divisions or the 4 divisions. They kind of like held them back, thinking, oh, something's going to happen in Calais. Patton's going to lead a fictitious army to hit them. So then they had 3 divisions there and they hit them with that stuff. And it was still brutal, but then we got our foothold and then we pushed on from there, right? What's the difference with Taiwan doing? Now we have things called satellites. So we can see when you are coming. So none of this, oh, maybe I'm hitting them. I can see you guys not only coming across, but I can see you assembling your ships to come across, right? I can see, oh, you're unlike the other things where I send like 20 planes and some other fakes. I can see you actually assembling, your 80 amphibious landing ships and your 1,000 fishing boats. Of their amphibious landing ships, the one actually military designed to land on a beach, they can hold 25,000 guys, which happens to be the same number as the number of Marines they have. Oh. Guys trained to land on a beach, right? But again, I got to get up to, Taiwan has 200,000 military guys defending the island. There's 2 major beaches where you could land a sufficiently large force. And again, they're relatively close together up on the Taipei side of the island, right? So, and I can shift over from one to the other, my forces super easy, right? It's like, it's not very far. It's like, half an hour, shift over, right? So if you come to this beach, I'm shifting over the guys. So then if I'm going across, the distance is 80 to 110 miles, right? Depending on where exactly I'm going, right? So that means sailing up halfway is roughly twice the distance of the English Channel. Once you cross the halfway, it's another 40 miles, again, twice the distance of the English Channel. Boats have not gotten, especially amphibious landing boats and fishing boats, have not gotten faster since World War II.
Interesting.
So then I'm going to, unless you're doing some, hovercraft thing, but again, we don't have that many of them, whatever. So I got to get across, and I'm doing these boats, and it's going to take me hours. I can watch, Oppenheimer movie while you're going from halfway over to here, right? But I'm going to start hitting you once you cross halfway. I'll know that you've been assembling for days.
Right.
And then I'm going to see you come across halfway. And then, okay, now you've crossed halfway. That's the red line. Now I hit you with stuff. So they got harpoon missiles. They got other missiles. Harpoon missiles are the best US missiles for taking out ships. I use those on the big amphibious boat with the most guys, right? And then after I sunk all those, then I go down to, I'm going to start taking out the fishing boat thing that you're trying to use to bring across some guys, which are not Marines, right? So even if somehow we're really bad shots and you somehow get some of the thing on there, how many get across? Half? 1/3? I think none of the big ships get across, because the other thing is that as I get to 10 miles in, 5 miles in, then I got artillery that can hit those things. So now I'm shooting 10 shots, 30 shots a minute from each gun, right? And I'm pounding all these fishing boats and crap that are still left, right? Multiple shots, in the hour or like half hour that it takes me to close up from 10 miles, 5 miles in, utterly wrecking the stuff. Let's assume somehow that some of these guys make it to the beach, right? Now you hit the heavy machine guns and our bunkers that we've built up there, and also the anti-landing ship defenses and all that kind of stuff, right? So way worse than a bloodbath than D-Day. I need to try and come across with more guys in D-Day. I'm going to need to land like 500,000 guys. And I have max 2 million soldiers to begin with, right? Single children with no military experience, right? Because one-child policy, right?
Yeah.
So then and no military experience, no actual military experience. And I'm tossing them into a meat grinder worse than D-Day. The Americans had 1 year of fighting in Italy and stuff like that before they, so they had seasoned troops going in to it, and they did terrible in the first year, and then they got better, right? So China's gonna come in and do that. The first thing you do is I'm gonna dial it to 11 and toss 500,000 guys. Actually, you can toss 1 million guys, lose half of them to the bottom of the ocean, and then have 500,000 guys hit the beach to overwhelm 200,000 guys. It's like, so that would be 8 times bigger than D-Day, 140,000 guys, bigger than D-Day. And D-Day had 140,000 initially, and then you had 500,000 guys in the next wave after you got the beachhead, right? Yeah. But in order to get your beachhead, you have to hit it with more guys.
With 3 to 1.
3 to 1.
3 to 1 then. 3 to 1 then, with much better capability now than then.
Right. And again, I don't think you've taken out the planes, other stuff, all the other things, which, even to get to that stage. Yeah. So amphibious landing is just like utterly insane, right? And the bloodbath on it, yeah.
Now, Brian, you've left out my favorite and Elon's favorite, okay? And maybe you did it on purpose to set me up, but I believe that the next war, and Elon believes that the next war will be a drone war. So at some point, I believe, this is just Randy, what do I know? I certainly haven't studied warfare, not even as much as you by a long shot. But if I'm Taiwan and I've got all these underground bunkers and all these underground stuff going on, I'm building, I don't know, a couple of million, maybe 100 million drones. They're cheap.
Right.
Why wouldn't I have built massive numbers of drones? Because now, of course, we know that you can swarm them. And you can do all of that from inside the bunker. A guy sitting in his grandma's basement can control 10,000 drones. So it would seem like when those part of the softening, maybe not all of the softening up, but as those ships are coming across, as the planes are coming across, you've got drones going out there that are doing damage like crazy.
Yeah. So China does make a lot of drones, DJI, some of the major commercial drone makers, but the military drones, especially something that can cross 100 miles, right, needs to have a bigger fuel tank to go there, right? So that tends to be like something the size of a Cessna or half the size of a Cessna. Right. So you got to build a lot of fairly big things, unless you have a carrier plane, and DARPA is working on that to have, you launch a bunch of small gremlins out of a carrier plane. So yes, technologically possible, could be done. There is a lot of drone use in Ukraine-Russia war, right. A lot of short range stuff where they fly something in, maybe only 2-3 feet big, and then they have a grenade inside it, and they drop grenades onto them. They just want them to go like 500 feet in the no man's zone, and then drop a grenade on a guy in the bunker and that kind of stuff. Right. And they also have had some better Turkish drones that were used to decoy the defenses of the Black Sea major ship, Moskva, for the Russians, and then they hit it with another missile that then sank it. So there have been drone usage, but it's still not millions. It's like thousands of small things, and then dozens to 100 of the bigger drones. So no one has gone to, and if someone was to make 100,000 heavy drones that could cross the Taiwan Strait, we know that they had done that. And so the capability that you're talking about is not something hideable, surprisable. And then even if it was hideable, surprisable, then you hadn't tested it. You've done simulations, but you have not actually tried it out. It's not like, U.S. has tested out its, Raptor things or whatever else they got in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they used it a bunch, and then they had to take time to like perfect it. It's like you're gonna take it out to a war zone where all kinds of things can go wrong, and then you're gonna say, okay, my entire plan depends upon things that I never used before. I built a bunch of them, but it's gonna go. We did simulations, and that's gonna happen. And again, we never tested it in any other conflict. Like the stuff that the Russians used, they tested in Syria, right?
Yeah.
So in general, you have to like use these things.
Yeah.
So
in real war. Yeah.
In a real war. Yeah.
All right. So we'll assume for the moment that Taiwan could win without the United States. And then if the United States and Japan and others, could help out a little bit, it might make the war shorter.
I would say Taiwan could not lose.
Yes.
Different from winning.
I got you. Yes, they could not lose. All right. And then you've got, of course, again, going back to the question of whether this would be a good idea to try when there's a if you have the right advice, you're probably being told the same thing that you're saying, which is low probability of success. The benefit would seem to be only the psychological benefit of reuniting your original empire or something. The possibility of owning the large semiconductor company, nationalizing it or whatever. And then there would be the question of any strategic value. Now, Taiwan seems maybe to be in a fairly interesting strategic location, but I don't know enough. Is even in a world where seagoing war is probably going to become less and less important, is Taiwan's strategic situation like a Vietnam, as we were told how important Vietnam was to the strategery of the South Pacific?
I would say it's what's the most important, if Hawaii was closer, right, to the United States, right? Let's say instead of Cuba, you had Hawaii there, right? And then it broke away. Then, it's important like that. Like it's an entire state. It's a big deal, right? So that's the importance of it. And in terms of, if you could get it for free, like, okay, if the leadership, you put in some puppet leadership, you support them, and they flip, and then they say, okay, we're taking Taiwan and we're unifying, right? Which, if they just had patience, that could have happened. Like I said, the economic ties, if you just like wait for, create an EU, right? Because you got a big economy, bigger than the European Union. You're already connected in with, Korea and all the other countries. If you just said, we're all about making money, right? Then you create this EU-like thing. Oh yeah, we're going to all make more money. And then we do this kind of like soft takeover thing of the EU, right? That should have been China's play all along. Behave nice, do whatever, and then we all make money, and then everything's good, right? But they chose not to do that, because of reasons. So, so then I would say, in terms of the economic value, it's always good to have another big port, another big stuff. But it's in terms of economic value, China's worth like $17 trillion, and Taiwan is sub 1 trillion, like 700 billion or something like that. A big thing, but less important size-wise than Hong Kong was in '97. I see. So it's important to have stuff there, but China's already got a fairly developed economy now, so it's not ultra critical. If you get TSMC, that would be good. But TSMC is really the 400 top guys, executives, and technologists there who could fly on 2 planes, right? So the equipment, Intel has the same equipment as TSMC, but they can't make their chips, right? There's a missing knowledge, experience there to make it all work properly. They can buy the same gear as from the Netherlands, whatever, as TSMC does. Yeah. So so it's worth want to have it, but you can't do it in a violent way.
Right, right. Okay. And if they want to do it in a nonviolent way, they should start treating Hong Kong nicer.
Right, right. They need to start behaving nice. But the thing is, um, clearly Xi Jinping doesn't care about that, and he's concerned about the other 1.4 billion people inside the country, and saying, "I'm doing this thing to make an example of them. To hey, don't rise up," because he's more concerned about holding his own power with his own people than he is about Hong Kong or Taiwan. Right? It's like those are. I'm beating up the external guy to make an example to keep the other guys in line, right? So it's not it's a dictator move that is not related to I want to get more stuff. I want to control what I got.
Right, right, right. And so how old is he, and what does the line of command under him look like?
I think he's about 60. Unfortunately, his father lived to like 92, 95. And he was also a top leader. In terms of like who's after him, he's pretty much eliminated all the meaningful guys below him, so that it's only like yes men below him.
Got it.
And anyone who could actually, be effective is a threat and is no longer there. Imprisoned, something happened.
Gotcha. Gotcha. What, from your potentially biased opinion, but hearing from your relatives in Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan, what is the sense of that leadership? What, are people just frustrated that there's just nothing they can do, and so just do your best under the circumstances you're dealt? Is there any chance that anybody's ever going to plot an uprising? Is there any theory, any kind of direction that you've ever heard that made sense in terms of some change in the politics of China?
I would say certainly within China, it's basically just accepted as a fact of life. You have to stay in line. Same thing for Hong Kong. You stay in line. You may not like it, but you can't say anything about it. Because basically they monitor all the stuff and they would know, right? So basically, you quietly accept the situation, right? I think there's zero chance of, well, a populist uprising thing was basically, that kind of COVID thing where people were, willing to do whatever when they got locked into apartment buildings, just going crazy about that kind of stuff, right? So that is the one thing. That's one thing that she does fear, is that if the people did rise up, the military would not be able to stop it.
I see.
Right? That the 2 million people, 3 million people in the military would not be able to put down. Right. If 500,000 people rose up to say, okay, now you're out. Right? It would be insanely bloody. But they know from the culture, from the communist, the rise of the communists, stuff like that, how that works, right? So so it would take a complete uprising. Theoretically, could happen. There's no indication that there's a sufficient organization stuff to make it happen, and they're deathly paranoid of any kind of gathering of in social media space. Since they break it up into chunks, like your groups on WeChat are small. You have to you can't get a million subscribers like that. You gotta build up a bunch of small groups, stuff like that. So everything about that is designed to prevent that activity.
So having said all that, how do you feel about Tesla's what do you want to call it? The risk factor associated with Tesla having such a massive presence, such a large part of their business being done in China. Do you see the risk as low, medium, high? How do you see that?
No different from any other big company, because even if you didn't have business in China, right? You're not like Apple with Foxconn and they make all your iPhones and stuff like that, and you try and move some stuff to Vietnam. Even if you don't have that exposure like Tesla and Apple do, like I said, once something happens, the disruption of TSMC chips happens, it hits the whole economy. Every company blows up. Whether you drop 80% or you drop 90%, you're utterly wrecked. And the world economy will be utterly effed for until it's resolved, right? And then there'll be a rebuilding period. So it'd be like we have a World War II in the space of 1 year, and then you have the rebuilding period. So the disruption would be big. And it's like, oh, did I have factories or whatever in Germany, or did I have factories in France? World War II happened. Stuff. What happened? Companies got impact. Yeah,
built factories really fast.
right.
So, all right, let's look at the other side, which is the current economic situation in China as a risk factor, but just in general. Do you think China figures it out, or do you think they're on a decline?
So this is something that I've looked at very closely, and I think that China and actually much of the world faces a decline. China and Japan, South Korea are in the lead on this in terms of their decline. This is a depopulation problem. Uh-huh. So China has officially said, okay, we lost 6 million people because of the difference between how many were born and how many died this in 2022. Mm-hmm. So they were at 1.09 fertility rate. And then 2 years before, for the last 2 years, it was 1.16. So replacement is 2.1. What does replacement mean? Replacement, 2 children means a woman over a lifetime has 2 kids or a bit more. And that means on average, 1 daughter, 1 son. So the mother replaces herself with her fertile daughter, right? So that means if you're at a 1.09, that means one woman replaces herself with 0.55 daughters, 0.54 daughters, mm-hmm. right? So about half. Mm-hmm. So the fertility period, 15 to 35, mm-hmm. right? And we chosen to lop off the first 5 to 10 years, say, hey, don't have kids too early. So then you're looking at 25 to 35 main fertility period, right? Mm-hmm. So that means that the people 35 to 40 are dropping off of fertility. And then the people, 10 to 15 are coming in to replace them. Just look at the population pyramid, and you see that China's coming in with about half. Mm. The people who are 35, the women who are 35 to 40 dropping off almost twice as much as the people who are 10 to 15 coming in. Right. So that means you have this drop, in your fertile population, say it's 150 million, depending on how you count the thing. And then in 20 years, 25 years, in the next generation, I got half. I got down to like maybe more than half, 80, 90 million. So then even though the overall population is taking a bunch of time to die because they got a bunch of old people, mm-hmm. right? Then the fertile population dropped even faster. So if I couldn't convince you to have 2 kids and you're having 1, I'm going to convince you to have 4 to try and get back. That doesn't happen, right? So this is where the population problem is really, really bad. The other thing is for the age of the people and their spending and work habits, right? So you have had 900 million people who are working age population, and that's dropping by about 10 million a year and going to accelerate to 20 million a year, right? So by 2030, we're losing working age population 10, 20 million. So before that, working age population was increasing, and then now it's going to decrease. So what was a 2 to 3% GDP headwind has now flipped into a negative 2% headwind because of that. But it's even worse for GDP because their average age is going to go from 38 to 50 by 2050. So basically start adding an average age of 1 a year, right? So what does that mean? Normal when people spend is over your lifetime, your maximum spending is when you're in your 40s. You're buying your first house, you're buying your second house, or you're switching to a bigger house, something like that. That's when your maximum earning and spending stuff is, mm-hmm. right? So then if you have people, half the people over 50, which is your average age, half under, half over, then most people over are in the saving for retirement, just trying to hang on mode already, right? I'm not spending that much. I'm doing some, but and it's dropping off more and more, right? So when you have 30% of the people over 65, they're alive, they count toward the population number, but they're not part of the GDP. You see that in Japan, right? Where they started shrinking in 2008. In 1998 or so, that's when they hit their peak GDP of around 5.5 trillion. And then that basically was a wall. And then they dropped down to the 5 trillion. But they play up and down. So as productive and hardworking as they are, the hitting people older and hitting a loss in population, loss in working age population means that their GDP hit a wall. They cannot grow anymore, even though they had economic miracle before that, right? And you see that in other countries, Spain, Italy, and stuff like that.
Right.
China could hit that wall, and then they can hold on and they start shrinking, right? Because they're going to go from potentially 1.4 billion people now, if that's even correct. Some people say it's not, but let's just say 1.4 trillion, 1.4 billion. 2050, they drop to 1.1 billion. They can lose the US population, and they've gotten older, 38 to 50, and they no longer have urbanization going for them. And so then you have this negative 3-4% move happening, which they're going to try and sustain. And the other thing is that things like real estate, which make up, 40-50% of their economy, Japan's real estate cut in half because less demand. Yes. So people think, oh, real estate, it always goes up. We always need more. When you have more people, more demand, right. Sure. Right. But when you get to the other side of that, then Japan had the real estate drop in half before they even get to their really bad loss of population. They went from 128 to 122, from 2008 to now. They're going to drop to below 100 million by 2050. So $17 trillion economy in China, $5 trillion economy in Japan, $1 trillion economy in South Korea. Taiwan also has the same issue. So you have, and then part of Europe, 1/3 of Europe. So you have like 1/3 of the global economy going into this seriously shrinking population thing. And even countries like Indonesia and Bangladesh have dropped below replacement. So if you have this thing hit China, we expected them to grow to $30 trillion, but they only get stuck at 17, 15 or 20 trillion. Then we lost $15 trillion of growth, and their banks are dealing with the fact that bad mortgages and other crap like that. It's the same thing for Japan. So over half of the globally important banks are taking it in the financial thing, and you have this massive hit. So it's a global thing. It would be hitting China. I don't think it hits badly until 2035 or something like that, because they still have some urbanization offset. We'll get a kind of taste of a drop to like -1% per year, and then it could, or stagnation, and then it hits the drop, barring Tesla bots, technology, saving us.
So then the United States, the way we save ourselves, because we also, in terms of our native population, are way below replacement, is by importing labor and importing intellectual labor. Good intellectual folks and folks that are hardworking and stuff. We've been doing that for our entire time as a country, and people want to come here. But China, not so much. Not so many people want to immigrate.
People net emigrate. They leave. That's the people who are going to, a large part of people who are going to Australia and Canada, who are among the big net intakers of the educated people, are taking people mainly from India and China currently. So, 100,000, 200,000 going to Canada, Australia, another 100,000 going to United States, another 100,000, 200,000 to various countries in Europe. So all the countries are fighting over a net migration of about 4 million people a year. So the total 10 million people moving around, 6 million kind of swapping between countries, and then 4 million net leaving. And it's a million from Africa, a million from other parts of Asia, stuff like that, and then mainly sourcing from the big population countries of India and China.
Yeah. So and ultimately, if the world becomes wealthier and wealthier, fewer and fewer people will want to move, because they'll be perfectly happy where they are. We're already seeing this. Sure, there are people that are still immigrating from South Korea into the United States, but not as many as were wanting to immigrate 20 years ago, because South Korea is a really nice place to live now. So why would I leave grandma and my children behind if I don't have to? Okay, and of course, my favorite example is Japan, which is, I guess, the racially purest country in the world,
Mhm.
with almost 99% Japanese stock still living there. But for the first time, starting about 5 years ago, I think,
Mhm.
they started allowing immigration and citizenship to non-Japanese people, and they now have, I think, it's on the order of 200,000 people that have broken into the purity of the race in Japan. So
Mhm.
that's an amazing example of what I think we'll be certainly looking at as a world in the future. Okay, let's look a little tighter, a little closer to home. What we have, the instant issues around China, which apparently are even affecting our stock market right now. Certainly maybe affecting Tesla's stock, as it has, fallen by 20% over the last month. The China worries in terms of the demand for product in China, which I offset by saying, yeah, but we keep opening up more and more places that we're exporting the Chinese cars to, and we're not really growing the production in China. So I'm not really terribly worried about it myself, but the street is worried. How worried are you about the next 2 years or 3 years in China in terms of their economy?
I think that they can stimulate and do things to keep the wheels on, for the next 10 years for sure, and maybe 15 to 20. But as I said, after that run of urbanization stuff, 65% urban going to 80%, where do you take people from the countryside and then
Right.
get them into the factories? It's a pipeline where they
Right.
come in and then get the jobs. Um, but they have big debt and real estate problems, where they did a bit of a Ponzi scheme for
Yeah.
that. But there are things they can do to prevent a collapse in those regards, because they can, I've got 5 million extra homes, I'm going to tear them all down,
Yes.
right? So they can fix the supply demand issues with totalitarian action. And they can also say, okay, you cannot move, you must continue to pay your mortgage. So they can do that. You can't do whatever. But that just means you don't collapse. It doesn't mean you grow,
Right.
right? You just don't collapse. But they're doing stuff to stimulate so they can get growth back to some level.
Right.
So they will do that as well.
Right.
But we need to have more technology. So the scenario of them, really collapsing, nothing, but they're not doing that well right now. High youth unemployment, 20, 30, even more percent of that. There's the richest people are doing fairly well, because they do buy most of the luxury goods in the world. A lot of that hidden money, black money, but people still need stuff.
Yeah.
So I expect some recovery, but it is not going to be going back to any super growth period, I don't think, barring a big technological breakthrough of some kind, which I do expect to have happen, with self-driving and with Tesla bot and that kind of thing. But just situation as is, electric cars, and all that kind of stuff, I think that continues to do reasonably well, but it's not going to, okay, people get to higher per capita income, and then we go from 25 million, 28 million cars per year up to 50 million, right? The big growth story, that doesn't look like it's happening. So I expect some level of stimulus packages to come and to offset things, and to, recessions don't last forever until you get to a permanent recession, which I don't see happening for 10, 15, 20 years. That it will be kind of like this in and out thing for a while. So we're going to tread water for a bit, is what I think is going to happen.
All right. Well, Brian, you've contributed the second episode here, setting us up for Jeff Lutz for tomorrow around noon, and then Larry Goldberg and I will argue and fight. No, okay. We will see if we can summarize everything that's taken place in these three parts on Saturday morning. So thank you for being with me today, and you guys know what to do. Hit the like button so that I'll have Brian back over and over and over again, and hit subscribe and notify, because you want to be notified of the Jeff Lutz edition and the Larry Goldberg coming up. And then, of course, follow Brian. Brian,
Nextbigfuture.com.
nextbigfuture.com. That's his blog, his science blog. It's amazing. And you need to be looking at it every single day because you never know what he's going to put up there. It could be something about Starship. It could be something about Neuralink, or it could be something completely unrelated. And we will give you another update probably in a week or so on LK99, which is not turning
Not looking that good.
Not looking that good.
Yeah. But we still have to hear from the original guys. So.
That's right. We need to hear it from the guys who originated it to find out for sure if it is a thing or not a thing. Brian, thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
To all of you out there, thrilled to be able to talk to you again today.